Welcome to Primary and Secondary Sources and Medline Searching. The objectives of this lesson are to define and describe Medline, MESH, medical subject headings, and the hierarchical or tree organization of Medline, describe the differences in searching with MESH terms and keywords, define and implement an effective search using subheadings, limits, Boolean operators, the explode feature, and MESH terms. Today, most secondary sources are electronic indexing systems that aid users in locating primary literature. These resources have very detailed and stepwise search engines that allow users to research the literature on a specific topic. Data provided includes bibliographic citation information, also known as a citation, including the article title, author, and source, or the journal name. Some resources will also provide the article abstract, which gives a brief description of the article and even a link to the full text article. If the abstract is included, the system is referred to as an abstracting system. If not, the resource is an indexing system. Interpreting data presented only in abstract form is appealing, but generally inappropriate. You should read an abstract to decide whether you would pull the original article. Once the article is pulled, you should critically read the article and make a clinical decision based off of your understanding of the study, its strengths, and weaknesses. You should never base a clinical decision from simply reading an abstract. Not all secondary resources have the same collection of journals, so it is important to search different databases for a comprehensive search. An advantage of secondary resources is the vast amount of data you are able to search. Secondary sources also provide a rapid method by which to search the primary literature. The search engines employed are extensive and provide immediate results once you learn the details of the system. Some of the considerations for secondary resources include scope of coverage, lag time, availability, cost, ease of use, and search techniques. The scope of coverage will vary across resources. Some databases will contain journals that relate to specific topics or subject matter, such as life science, biomedicine, pharmacy, etc. It is important to make sure that the database you are searching contains the journals that relate to your topic. Additionally, some databases will only contain U.S. articles, while others will have an international scope. Likewise, some databases will restrict their journals to English language only, and therefore you might have a less comprehensive coverage of the topic. While some databases will include journal articles in foreign languages, they may also provide an English abstract. You should only pull articles for the language for which you are comfortable with. If you do not speak Spanish, do not pull a Spanish written article. Another consideration is lag time. There is a lag time between when an article is published and when it is indexed into a secondary resource. This lag time is due to the process that the journal article must go through to be indexed properly. For inclusion into Medline after publication, the article is obtained or submitted to the National Library of Medicine, where the article is assigned subject headings from a controlled vocabulary list called MESH, medical subject headings. The article is then submitted to PubMed, a secondary resource made available from the government. Vendors such as EBSCOhost and Ovid receive data and display the articles using their own Medline databases. These Medline databases use the vendor's own interface. The time frame of this process will vary between secondary resources, but the user must keep in mind that their search may not contain the latest information on the search subject because of this lag time. However, some secondary resources are able to be accessed, and these records will be denoted by an in-process MESH heading. PubMed contains such records. A third consideration is availability cost. Secondary resources are very expensive and typically require a library or institutional budget to finance. Secondary resources may be priced based on the number of users the site wishes to have. As such, users will need access to the system. Many times you may have access to a secondary source, such as Medline, but you may not be able to pull the full text article unless your library subscribes to Medline. Another consideration is ease of use. Each secondary source uses a powerful search engine. These search engines may or may not use the same language. As such, you will need to become familiar with the database structure and terminology to effectively search. You will need to practice your search techniques to become proficient with using secondary sources. And the last consideration are the search techniques. There is no standardization of search terms across secondary resources. It is important to be familiar with the structure and search terms of the secondary resource you are using. The medical subject headings, or MESH, is the index term that the National Library of Medicine uses for its databases. Another database, Iowa Drug Information Service, IDIS, uses the United States Adopted Name, or USAN, and the International Classification of Diseases, ICD, coding system. Under the auspices of the National Library of Medicine, Medline is the premier bibliographic database that contains over 26 million references to biomedical journal articles. Medline is the most well-known secondary resource in the world and is produced by the National Library of Medicine. The print version Index Medicus is no longer available. Medline contains over 5,600 biomedical journals published in the United States and other countries. Although coverage is worldwide, 91% of the most recently added records are from English language sources or have English abstracts. Medline contains citations from 1966 to the present. Medline citations include the journal title, author names, abstract, MESH terms, journal, first author's affiliation, language, and publication type, such as a review article, randomized controlled trial, letter. The lag time for articles varies, but the database itself is updated weekly. It usually takes 3 to 4 weeks for a journal article to arrive in Medline. The database is searched using a controlled vocabulary called the MESH headings. Apart from original research articles, primary literature, Medline also contains review articles, letters to the editor, and comment articles. It does not include conference proceedings or symposiums. Medline is available through a variety of interfaces and vendors. I have listed 3 on this slide: EBSCOhost, PubMed, and Ovid. Each of these vendors take the information from Medline and display it to the user. Each of these vendors operates a little bit differently, but the same search will provide the same results. And for the ease, I will teach everybody PubMed because PubMed is freely available from the government. You're able to use PubMed, however, you may not be able to access the full text article without a fee. So for this class purposes, I will teach how to use PubMed. 3 other secondary sources are Academic Search Premier, Google Scholar, and the Cochrane Database of Systematic Reviews. The Academic Search Premier is a secondary resource that uses EBSCOhost as a search engine. This secondary database contains articles from a wide variety of medical disciplines. It is designed specifically for academic institutions. Academic Search Premier is a multidisciplinary full-text database containing full text of more than 4,700 journals, which includes 4,000 peer-reviewed titles. In addition to providing full text for the article, this database offers indexing and abstracts for more than 12,000 journals. Academic Search Premier contains not only scholarly journal articles from Medline, but also magazine and newspapers covering an array of topics. Be careful though, because the database contains magazines and trade organization periodicals, which have articles that are not considered as rigorous as those found in medical journals. You may want to limit your search to scholarly or peer-reviewed articles. Google Scholar is an online, freely accessible search engine that allows users to access full-text articles and article citation abstracts. This internet-based search engine locates scholarly materials across a variety of professional areas. Google Scholar will search scholarly literature from articles, theses, books, abstracts, court opinions, academic publishers, professional societies, online repositories, universities, and other websites. You need to access Google Scholar through the pharmacy site, or you can just go to Google and type in Google Scholar. You will then need to go under settings and set up the library links. Google Scholar will link to the University of Colorado Medical Library, so you will be able to determine if that article is available as a full text through the library. Google Scholar searches quite a bit of literature, so you have to be careful. You're going to get a large amount of information retrieved when you do search Google Scholar. This database returns many citations, and oftentimes you're better off searching Medline before you go to Google Scholar. A recent article showed that PubMed provides more relevant searches and search results compared to Google Scholar. There are cases in which I will use Google Scholar, mainly when I'm looking for hospital protocols or new information, or I want to find articles that are cited by a particular author, or if the article is not in Medline, I will then search for Google Scholar, and I know it has the library links, so I can know right off the bat whether or not the University of Colorado Library carries that article. The last secondary source I like to mention is the Cochrane Database of Systematic Reviews, and this is just one part of the Cochrane Library. This database includes the full text of systematic reviews prepared by members of the Cochrane Collaboration, a non-for-profit organization of 31,000 contributors from more than 120 countries. The group is based in England. Contributors work to produce systematic reviews of healthcare interventions. Reviews that are currently in progress and expected date of completion are also listed. Data from 1975 to the present is updated quarterly. These evidence-based reviews about therapy are very well known in the medical literature and highly regarded because data is based upon an extensive review and analysis of the current literature. Some key points about Medline. Medline is provided by the National Library of Medicine. Medline uses medical subject headings or MESH vocabulary. So when you search, it's a good idea to use the MESH search terms. Primary literature is considered original research. Medline contains lots of information, different types of articles, only one of them being original research. Other information you will find in Medline includes editorials, review articles, and commentaries. You can enter Medline through the home page on the CU Health Science Library site. As you see there under the top resources, biomedical biosciences on the left-hand side, you will see PubMed as number 1. And again, if you go down a little further, you do see Cochrane Library, but Embase, which we'll mention in a moment, is basically a European Medline, if you will. And then there's also Google Scholar there. Ovid Medicine is another interface for Medline. Again, in this class, I'm going to teach how to use PubMed, and those skills are transferable to Ovid. So I've mentioned quite a bit about MESH headings, medical subject headings, and why use MESH terms. Well, MESH terms are used for the articles, and they are indexed using this specific vocabulary. This standardized vocabulary helps users locate articles that contain MESH terms. And MESH terms are organized within Medline in a hierarchy referred to as a tree structure. This hierarchy system allows you to search either broad topics such as cardiovascular diseases or more specific topics such as sick sinus syndrome. When you are searching, you can select a narrow topic or a broad topic that will encompass all terms listed beneath. When you're asked to answer a drug information question that requires searching the primary literature, you need to be certain that you searched all available literature. One way to ensure the requester you searched all literature is to use MESH terms. You want to be certain when you answer a drug information question that you searched all viable literature and that you have the best response to give to that requester. There are some limitations of using MESH terms. MESH headings are not available for all topics, such as new drugs. And very recent citations are not yet indexed, so you're not going to hit the brand new articles when using MESH terms. Indexers don't assign MESH terms for every word in the abstract. And new MESH terms are not retroactive. So a MESH term is individualized medicine, came into existence in 2010. So prior to 2010, there are no results for this MESH heading. You can search by a keyword, which we will also go over, and to put individualized medicine in quotes. And that way you will return articles that have the term individualized medicine. And it's also possible to miss MESH terms, such as you're searching prions, but you missed prion diseases. So we will review some of this in just a moment.
Librarians are kind of really into them, and hopefully this video will tell you a little bit more about MESH terms and why you should be into them too. So what exactly are MESH terms? Well, first of all, MESH is an acronym and it stands for Medical Subject Headings. And it is a controlled vocabulary that's used to index all of the citations in PubMed. Now, that's a lot of library speak. What's a controlled vocabulary? What does it mean to be indexed? Well, this video is going to cover what is a controlled vocabulary, where do MESH terms come from, and how do you actually use MESH? Before I talk about a controlled vocabulary, first I want to take a minute and talk about keyword searching. So when we use Google, we use keyword searching, and we can just type in words. And so for my example, I'm just going to type in the term monkeys. And not surprisingly, the results are about monkeys. However, I'm just searching this as a keyword, so Google's actually pulling up web pages that simply mention the word monkeys. So if I scroll down a little bit more, yes, I have a lot of information about monkeys, but then I also have this article about sea monkeys. And I think we all know that sea monkeys are not real monkeys. So while it can be a really great search in terms of bringing you back some of the information that you want, it's not very targeted, and you'll actually end up with a lot of irrelevant results when you search by keyword. So now that we know a little bit about how keyword searching works in databases like Google, we can talk about what is a controlled vocabulary. Language can be really imprecise. There can be many words for the same concept. Looking at this screen, you can see that brain cancer could also be brain tumor or neoplasm, or you could call it benign or malignant, and then there are pluralized versions of all of those terms. If I was searching using keywords, I would have to enter in all those terms to ensure that I'm covering this concept of brain cancer. However, if I have something like a controlled vocabulary, I can enter one term and ensure I'm talking about a single concept, because a controlled vocabulary is essentially like a dictionary for a database, where specific terms have been defined to mean a particular concept. So in this example of brain cancer, instead of having to enter in all of those terms to cover this concept, you could just enter one term such as brain cancer, and you could search and retrieve all of the information related to that concept. And MESH is a type of controlled vocabulary, and it's the one that is specific to PubMed. Where do MESH terms come from? Well, MESH was developed by the National Library of Medicine. It was originally published in book form as medical subject headings. However, today it exists as an online database, and it's updated annually. And there's this whole group of nerds at the National Library of Medicine who are really into indexing things that assign MESH terms to citations in PubMed. Now, not every citation in PubMed gets assigned MESH terms because those nerds, they're subject experts And every single citation that gets assigned mesh terms has a human who actually looks at the full text and decides what the main concepts are within that text, and it will assign mesh terms based on those concepts. When you're using PubMed and you're using mesh terms, you can be reasonably sure that whatever mesh term is assigned to that article is typically going to be about that concept. So it's a really great way to actually target your search in PubMed. But how do I actually use mesh? Searching mesh is actually pretty easy. Going to our PubMed homepage, which hopefully is familiar by now, next to the search box, I know I'm in PubMed because this menu tells me so. If I look at this drop-down menu, I can see all of the different databases that are available in alphabetical order. And I can go ahead and select mesh. Thinking about the search you did earlier of dental and infective endocarditis, when I'm searching mesh, I want to search by concept because that's how the controlled vocabulary works. So I don't want to just type in that entire search. Instead, I'm going to start with infective endocarditis. And I end up with two results. One of them is non-infective endocarditis, and then one is just a general endocarditis. And if I click on that term, it's going to take me to the record, which gives me the definition of this term. So this is how the National Library of Medicine is defining this term and how they're using it. After that are the subheadings, and these are different aspects of this concept. And if I continue to scroll down, there's a list down here of entry terms. If you remember back to automatic term mapping, when you type those keywords into your PubMed search, these entry terms are what tell PubMed to expand out your search and include the mesh term in addition to the keywords that you've entered. So in this case, you can see that infective endocarditis is one of the entry terms. And so when I typed that previously into the search box, that's how it knew to include this mesh term. And mesh is a hierarchical vocabulary, meaning that there are both broader and narrower terms. And finally, and down here at the bottom, it's showing you that hierarchy. So I have endocarditis here in the middle, and then I have two narrower terms, and then I have broader terms. So now I'm pretty happy with this mesh term. This is the one that I want to include in my search, and it's pretty easy to do that from the record. I'm just going to come up here to the top right-hand corner, and I have my PubMed Search Builder. And I'm just going to click Add to Search Builder, and it's going to add the term in its properly formatted way. So now I want to go to this other concept of my search, which is dental. Now this is a pretty non-specific keyword, so it's not really a surprise that I'm getting 257 results. However, the one that I'm interested in is actually the first one, which is dental health services. And again, I have the definition, I have these subheadings, which if you remember back to our previous mesh entry, this list probably looks a little bit different. So every mesh term doesn't necessarily have every subheading assigned to it. Again, I have these entry terms, and if I continue to scroll down, again, I see that hierarchy. So I'm going to go ahead and add this to my search. And I actually have a couple of options here. In this particular example, I do want to use the AND operator. However, if I wanted to do an or a not search, I could select that here before clicking Add to Search. If I go ahead and click Add to Search, I now have both of my mesh terms here, and I can go ahead and do my PubMed search directly from here. And that takes me to my search result. I can take a look at what I have here, and perhaps maybe I want to continue narrowing down this search.
So one way you can choose the mesh database is from the PubMed home screen. You just choose the drop-down arrow till you see mesh. As mentioned earlier, Medline uses what's known as Boolean operators. And a lot of databases do use these Boolean operators. The Boolean operators are known as AND, or not, and they allow you to search using multiple terms to create relationships between those terms within a search. The Boolean operator AND tells Medline to search for both terms. So you're looking for an article that contains both of those terms. The Boolean operator OR tells Medline to search for articles that contain one or more of those search terms. So you're looking for articles that contain either of the search terms. The Boolean operator NOT will look for articles that do not contain the search terms. The diagram on the far left shows you the AND Boolean logic operator. Medline is looking for articles that contain both search terms, saxagliptin and naive. The middle diagram is showing us OR Boolean logic operator. Medline is searching for articles that contain saxagliptin or naive. And the last one on the far right is showing us articles returned with saxagliptin and not naive. Again, mesh terms are organized within Medline in a hierarchy referred to as a tree structure. When you search the term cardiovascular diseases in the mesh database, you notice a hierarchy of terms listed below the all mesh category header. This is a tree structure for cardiovascular diseases. The first branch is cardiovascular abnormalities, followed by cardiovascular infections, heart diseases, and pregnancy complications. Cardiovascular and then cardiovascular diseases. The plus to the right of arrhythmias under heart disease means that there are more terms that can be classified as cardiac arrhythmias, and this term can be exploded. The default for PubMed is to explode all mesh terms. The default for others, such as EBSCOhost, another interface for Medline, is not to explode these terms. You have to choose to explode the terms. So again, the plus to the right on the mesh term arrhythmias, cardiac, means that there are other terms, mesh terms, listed below that are more specific, and that these terms will be exploded when using PubMed, but will not be exploded when using other search engines such as EBSCOhost, Medline. So in our previous slide, we saw the hierarchy for cardiovascular diseases. And now on this slide, we see the extended hierarchy under arrhythmias, cardiac. And you can see under that is arrhythmias, sinus, and then atrial fibrillation, atrial flutter, bradycardia, etc. You also see that under arrhythmias, sinus, where there was a plus sign to the right of that term, that you have two syndromes there, or you have sick sinus syndrome, and then you also have sinus arrest, cardiac. So if I only want articles about sick sinus syndrome, I would choose the mesh term sick sinus syndrome. However, if I want articles on all terms below cardiac arrhythmias, then I would choose cardiac arrhythmia to search. So Medline will search your most specific mesh term. So here's the record for sick sinus syndrome. And you can see first is a definition. Sick sinus syndrome is a condition caused by dysfunctions related to the sinoatrial node. You can also see the year this was introduced as a mesh term. It was introduced in 1980. And then underneath that you see subheadings. Subheadings are used to limit searches to a specific aspect of your topic. The National Library of Medicine describes subheadings as qualifiers when applied to mesh terms are used to describe an explicit characteristic of the mesh term. And then to view the subheadings under your mesh term, you need to click on that mesh term. Subheadings vary for each mesh term. You do not have to choose a subheading when you search. When you do a general search, all subheadings are searched. However, if you want to do a specific search, specifically maybe to the drug therapy of sick sinus syndrome, you can choose that subheading and click the box that says drug therapy. At the bottom, below the subheadings, you have two choices. You can restrict this to the MeSH major topic. This means that you will create a search that only returns those records for which the subject heading is a major point of the article. You can also choose the box, do not include MeSH terms found below this term in the MeSH hierarchy. As I mentioned before, PubMed automatically explodes all your terms and will search for the most specific terms. If you choose the box that says do not include MeSH terms found below this term in the MeSH hierarchy, the system will only search for that broader MeSH topic.
PubMed, applying subheadings and other features of the MeSH database. This is a brief demonstration of how to use some of the features of the MeSH database to perform a targeted search in PubMed. We will build on our search for articles on measles outbreaks by adding the concept of statistics. First, we will search for the concept of measles. Here are the MeSH database search results for measles. This time, let's find out more about this subject heading. To look at the full display, click on the term. The full display includes additional information and search options. At the bottom of the screen, you see the term in its position within the MeSH hierarchy. Terms listed below your term are narrower or more specific. In this case, there is a specific type of measles listed. It is important to note that when PubMed searches for a term, any indented or narrower terms are also searched. If we were interested in subacute sclerosing panencephalitis in particular, it would be best to search using that term rather than the broader term measles. If we search for measles in PubMed, we will get articles about measles in general, as well as articles about subacute sclerosing panencephalitis, unless we choose the option, do not include MeSH terms found below this term in the MeSH hierarchy. In most cases, you would want to allow PubMed to include more specific terms. Notice the Restrict to MeSH Major Topic option. Use this checkbox to limit your search to articles where the concept described by this subject heading was one of the main points discussed. In this example, we will choose this option to retrieve articles where a main subject of the article is measles. As we are going to build a search using more than one term, we will add this part of the PubMed search by clicking Add to Search Builder. With our first concept in the PubMed Search Builder, we can now look for our second concept, disease outbreaks. Subheadings describe specific aspects of the subject that are discussed in the article. You may use a subheading to restrict your search to a subtopic of interest. In this example, we want to make our search more specific by using a subheading. The subheading, Statistics and Numerical Data on Disease Outbreaks, describes our topic. To add the concept of disease outbreaks with the subheading of Statistics and Numerical Data to our search, we select the subheading and click Add to Search Builder. Now we're ready to click Search PubMed. When we searched for measles and disease outbreaks, we retrieved over 1,000 citations. By restricting our search to articles where measles is a major subject and using the subheading of Statistics and Numerical Data on Disease Outbreaks, we've narrowed our retrieval to about 250 citations that should be focused on our topic.
The limit or filter function in Medline provides a means of filtering unwanted articles from a set of search results. It limits the search according to the criteria the searcher selects. Examples of limits or filters include language, human or animal species, gender, age, review articles, latest updates, publication type, publication year, and local holdings. You should always try to use limits appropriate for your search. The filters English and human should routinely be applied to searches. Consider using the publication type field for limiting the search to randomized controlled trial or review article. There are multiple ways to search Medline for information. You can search terms that appear in the specific fields. For example, if you want articles about the sick sinus syndrome, you may want to search articles in which the term appears in the title. To do this, choose Advanced Search. You will also notice a field descriptors located in the drop-down list to the left of the search bar, and you can choose Title.
I wanted to explore some more advanced search options within PubMed, some additional search features and techniques that you may find useful as you go forward with searching the database. The first recommendation would be to go up to the top right-hand corner and click Sign In to NCBI. This will enable you to create a free NCBI account. You can simply click Register for an NCBI account. Since I already have one, I'm going to sign in. And you can see my initials here, and it's saying I'm signed in. I can hit my NCBI. And the important features of this is that it enables you to save searches. This can be very useful if you're running multiple searches during a day and you want to make sure you don't duplicate your work, and you also want to make sure that you save your work. Note here I can create a bibliography, collections, and it tracks my recent activity with all the searches. So this is very, very useful for you as you go forward during a project. Given that it's free, I highly encourage you to create a free account. Let's go back to PubMed now. Now, during the basic session, you learned how to search by keyword and also by mesh database down here. For now, let's take a look at the advanced search function. I can click Advanced, and notice here on the drop-down menu I have all sorts of headings that I can search under. There are a few I would call attention to. First of all, author is not typically a good way to find an article. Since there can be numerous John Smiths, for instance, it would be difficult to find the John Smith that you're actually wanting to look up. Going down further, you can search by journal. This can be particularly useful if you have a particular journal that you're wanting to find articles in. Mesh terms, as discussed in the basic search features. The title is good, but it's very specific. I encourage people to use the title abstract, which gives you a slightly broader range of articles. So let's search under title abstract, and let's just try ibuprofen. Notice that I have 10,500 results. That's quite a bit. So I'm going to need to scale that down. Now look over here on the left-hand side. You'll see that I have all sorts of different filters, or limiters as they're called, that I can limit my results by. Under here where it says show additional filters, I can click this and I can add in more filters as the need arises. It depends on your account and how you've set it as far as what filters will automatically come up here on the left hand side of the page when you run a search. So in this case, let's say that I want to limit to English articles. This cuts it down slightly. And I want to limit to only children and during the last 5 years. And you can notice that's definitely cut my results down. And now finally, let's say that we only want systematic review articles. And I'm down now to 31 results, which is far easier to look through. A couple of things with these results. You'll notice up here at the top there is a Send To link. If I click that, I can send to my bibliography in my NCBI account. I can send out to a citation manager. And I can also email the results to myself. This is a very popular feature. If I hit this, it will drop down a menu asking where to email. And I can note I will want to use the abstract to email. I find that the best in most cases because it gives you the abstract with the citation. If you're evaluating articles, you would definitely want that. Going back here, let's try clicking on an article, this one for instance, and I can scroll down, see the abstract, I can see the PMID number, which is important if you want to get the article. So let's go back now, and notice that I have 31 results. Let's go back to the Advanced tab. And right under here I can see some of my searches that I've already done. And this is very useful, because what I can do now is say, alright, I want to search ibuprofen in the title abstract field. And let's say I also want to do another search in the title abstract field. Perhaps I want to put in a term like ulcer. And let's try to search this. And I'm going to need to clear my filters to get all the results. And it's showing 172 results. See what I can find in the last 5 years. And I'm down to 28 results. So you can see how I can use these terms in the advanced search function to basically toggle the different results. You put in one term at a time, and then you can combine them using the Boolean operator here, and or not. I can also add in more fields and create long complex searches. Let's go back now to the PubMed homepage. And again, be aware that once you activate a filter, it stays on until you clear it. I'm now going to go down to Clinical Queries. Clinical Queries is useful for quickly searching clinical study categories, systematic reviews, and genetics, if that is in your area. So let's try something. Let's try ibuprofen and ulcer. And let's search for that. You'll notice here in systematic reviews we get 21 results, a couple of results in medical genetics, and the clinical study categories has 262. Notice I can define it by the category, such as, let's say, prognosis, and the scope is broad here, or I can go down to narrow. Narrow only gives me 4, broad gives me 42. So that's a very interesting and easy way to quickly narrow down your searches by clinical categories or systematic reviews.
You can search by keyword, journal name, author, and title of the article. Keywords are words that appear in the title, abstract, or as mesh terms for the article. Keywords are free text. Use of keywords rather than mesh terms results in a broad search strategy that retrieves relevant and irrelevant articles. Medlines will always try to map to mesh terms. Sometimes there will be a mesh term that will suffice. Other times there will not, in which case a keyword is needed. PubMed provides supplementary concepts for newer terms. You search using the supplementary concept mesh term if a true mesh term is not available. Keywords are typically used when there are no mesh terms available for a specific concept or when the mesh term is not specific enough. For example, if a new drug has just been released but has not been given a mesh term, then search using a keyword. When searching with keywords in PubMed databases, as opposed to the mesh database, use of quotes around a phrase informs Medline to retrieve articles in which the exact phrase occurs. For example, searching tendon rupture without quotation marks returns 12,209 citations. These include citations containing both words tendon and rupture in any searchable field. When searching tendon rupture within the quotes, 2,802 citations are retrieved, while quoted rupture tendon quote results in 141 citations. Although enclosing a phrase in quotes is handy, use this feature cautiously because enclosing search terms in a quote restricts documents retrieved to only those citations with the exact matches to the text string within the quotes. Quoting a phrase also prevents automatic mapping of individual terms to mesh terms. If you are searching for articles that describe tendon rupture in a patient receiving a fluoroquinolone, the best search strategy would be to search for the corresponding mesh terms. If you notice on the slide, the entry terms that are mapped to the mesh term of ascorbic acid include vitamin C, sodium ascorbate, ferrous ascorbate, and others. So in the entry for your mesh term, you will find what entry terms will map to that mesh term. For example, if you received a call from a physician asking on an article about the use of saxagliptin in naive patients, which are patients with type 2 diabetes that have not been treated with medications, you will need to search the primary literature. From the MESH database, choose the terms corresponding to saxagliptin and diabetes mellitus type 2. Limit your search to human and English. You will end up with roughly 174 articles. Now in the search field, behind the search terms, saxagliptin, supplementary concept, and diabetes mellitus type 2 mesh, type in A-N-D, naive, N-A-I-V-E. You will retrieve roughly 19 articles. We used the term naive as a key word in this search. So we searched for the two mesh terms, saxagliptin, which is a supplementary concept, and then we searched diabetes mellitus type 2 as a mesh term. We then typed in A-N-D, a Boolean logic operator, followed by the word naive, N-A-I-V-E. And then we retrieved 19 articles. The one article, long-term 4-year safety of saxagliptin in drug-naive and metformin-treated patients with type 2 diabetes by Rosenstock, looks interesting. So when I click on the title, I will retrieve the abstract. You could also see a plus sign to the left of author information. You can click on this plus sign to get information about the author, such as where the author practices. You can see the abstract there with aims, methods, results, and conclusion. You can see that this trial was registered with clinicaltrials.gov. You can see the PMID number, which is the PubMed identification number. Below that, you can see the mesh terms. These are mesh terms that are mapped to this article. The mesh term diabetes mellitus, type 2 / blood tells us that blood is a subheader for the mesh term diabetes mellitus type 2. The next one, diabetes mellitus type 2 / drug therapy with the asterisk, tells us that diabetes mellitus type 2 with the subheader drug therapy has been restricted to a major medical topic. That's what the asterisk implies. The asterisk means that this is a major medical topic for the article. On the right-hand side, we can see full text links. We can see full text links to the Wiley Library and also to the Health Science Library at the University of Colorado. Whenever you have a choice, choose a free full text if that pops up. Otherwise, you should always choose the Health Science Library article linker. Do not choose the publisher linker. In this case, that would be the Wiley one in the orange. This will take you directly to the publisher without going through the library. You need to go through the library in order to get the full text of the article. One other feature I find very useful for an article that I found interesting is to look at similar articles. Medline will pull up articles that use the similar mesh terms. So here you can see there are several other similar articles, and you can see if any of those are relevant to your search. So once I click on the University of Colorado full text link, I have another screen that comes up. And down below you can see where it says view it. It tells me where the full text is available. I usually just choose the first one. So it says full text available at EBSCOhost Consumer Health Complete. So I will click on that blue hyperlink to retrieve the full text article. In this case, however, I have a no search results found. I will then go back to my full text screen and choose the second option. So this slide shows us what happens when we use mesh terms and what happens when we use keyword terms. I did this search at the beginning of August. And you can see with using mesh terms, serotonin syndrome, I had 761 hits. When I chose to restrict it to a major topic, it decreased to 683 hits. The mesh term serotonin reuptake inhibitors had 17,668 hits. When I restrict this to a major topic, I get 11,940 hits. The second part here shows us without a mesh term. When I use serotonin syndrome without quotes, and when I use serotonin syndrome with quotation marks, and then when I use serotonin uptake inhibitors without quotes, and serotonin uptake inhibitors with quotes. From looking at the articles I retrieve using mesh terms compared to without mesh terms, I hope everyone can see how using mesh terms provides a more specific search. Whenever I am researching anything for my practice site, which is Centura Health, I always want to use mesh terms. I need to make sure I have the appropriate mesh terms by considering all potential synonyms and keywords that would be mapped to those mesh terms. But I can then tell my reader that I searched these mesh terms in Medline, and here are the articles I found. It is very important for you to search Medline using mesh terms. You want to be certain that you searched all viable literature, and one way to do that is by using mesh terms. So the basics of Medline searching. Number 1, clearly define the question you need to answer. Understand what you are trying to answer so you can decide on the appropriate search strategy and mesh terms. The second step is to develop a search strategy. Decide on what Boolean logic operators you will be using. Decide on the synonyms. Number 3, decide what fields you want to search. Do you want to search the title? Do you want to search the abstract? Do you just want to search the entire database with mesh terms? Number 4, if searching for a subject, decide what mesh terms are appropriate before actually conducting the search. You need to decide on your mesh terms. You need to take a look at the mesh database, pull up the entry for that mesh term, take a look at the keywords that are mapped to the mesh term. Consider any synonyms. Take a look at the tree structure. Are you missing any topics that are more narrow than your mesh term? Number 5, you want to decide how broad or narrow your search focus should be. I often will decide this when depending upon the question. If my question is very narrow in focus, I may want a narrow search. I often will search narrow first and then broaden it if I don't find any articles that are appropriate. Number 6, determine whether the use of a keyword is necessary. Remember in our example, we added the keyword naive, and that helped us to retrieve articles that were appropriate for our search. Number 7, apply limits to the search when appropriate. I almost always use the limits English and human. I will then start using the limits of publication type. I will consider narrowing my search by looking at review articles, systematic review articles, randomized controlled trials, or clinical trials. So consider using limits when appropriate. Number 8, review your results. Did you find some articles that are relevant to your search? Number 9, select the desired citations for printing, downloading, or emailing directly. And then number 10, consider whether other search strategies can be applied and return the search. So for example, if you didn't get the results that you wanted, you may want to consider broadening your search, deleting some of your limits, or you may want to reinvestigate the mesh terms that you chose to search. And if you use subheaders, maybe it was too narrow and you should delete the subheaders. So there's quite a variety of ways you can search, and you will be able to practice this this week with the homework assigned. So here's an example. You receive a call from an internal medicine physician who would like to know the best way to treat severe anemia in a Jehovah's Witness. The patient has severe uterine bleeding and anemia. What information can you provide? So in our MESH database, we type in Jehovah's Witnesses. We can then click on Jehovah's Witness and return the record. We can see the definition. We can see the year that it was introduced, 2003. We can also see the subheadings, history, psychology, which are not really pertinent in our search. We could restrict this to a MESH major topic, and we can see the entry terms. So we can see that Jehovah's Witnesses, Jehovah's Witness, Witnesses, Jehovah's, and Watchtower Bible and Tract Society are all mapped to the MESH term Jehovah's Witnesses. Under the tree structure, we can see that Jehovah's Witnesses falls under humanities category and also persons category. So let's choose to restrict to MESH major topic and then click Add to Search Bar. Medline will then search Jehovah's Witness as a major topic. Our second MESH term is anemia. So now we want to type anemia into the MESH search bar. Choose anemia by clicking on the box and then Add to Search Builder. If you click the term anemia, this tree structure will appear. And once your search terms appear in the PubMed Search Builder box, you can choose Search PubMed. By searching the MESH terms Jehovah's Witnesses as a major topic and anemia as a MESH term, I get 10 items when I limit it to review. You can see your limits on the left-hand side, and you can see that I have chosen review. I've also limited to English. On the right-hand side, you can see that the English language articles are being returned. If you notice on the right-hand side in the search details box, you can see Jehovah's Witnesses as a major topic and the Boolean operator and anemia as a MESH term and review as a publication type. The search retrieves 83 articles before the limits of English language and review articles are applied. Once I apply those limits, I get 10 articles. Citations number 1 and 2 look very interesting. You can click on the title to review the abstract. This will also tell you whether or not the article is available at the University of Colorado Library. Choice number 1 is available at the library. I can then follow the steps that I have shown before to download the full text article. Another example is a physician calls you and wants to know what literature is available to support the use of statins in the treatment of Alzheimer's disease. What information can you provide? Again, using the MESH database, we want to type statins into the search bar. So once we type statins into this MESH search bar, we notice we get 4 results. And the first one is hydroxymethylglutarol-CoA reductase inhibitors. So again, the statins are not called statins in the Medline database, but they are referred to by their mechanism of action, which is hydroxymethylglutarol-CoA reductase inhibitors. So that is the term we would want to choose. Once we choose that term, we can get the record in the MESH database. Hydroxymethylglutarol-CoA reductase inhibitors was introduced in 1998. Then you can see the subheaders listed. Again, you can restrict it to a MESH major topic. Below that, you can see the entry terms that are mapped to this MESH header. And sure enough, statins are mapped to this MESH header. You can see the tree structure. It's indexed under, anti-cholerystemic agents. So again, not all search terms as we know them are in the database. Statins is actually kind of a slang term referring to the group of drugs. However, in the Medline database, they are mapped to the MESH header describing their mechanism of action. And this MESH term was introduced in 1998. You may also notice a MESH term that refers to these agents by their pharmacologic action, and it has in brackets pharmacologic action. When you click on this MESH term, you can see all the drugs that are mapped to this MESH term. You can see that you have a combination drug mapped to this term, amlodipine, atorvastatin. And then you start getting your statins, atorvastatin, cirvastatin, fluvastatin, lovastatin. You also get meglutol. And then mavastatin, pitavastatin, pravastatin, red yeast, rice, rosuvastatin, and simvastatin. When searching in the Medline database, I often choose the main MESH term. But you can use either of these MESH terms. Again, you would just reassess your search if you do not get the articles that you are looking for. So I choose the main MESH header, and I think I'm going to restrict it by using my subheaders. I am going to choose the subheader therapeutic use. I will then click Add to Search Builder. I then go back up to my MESH search field and I type in Alzheimer's disease. Again, the record for Alzheimer's disease pops up and you can see the definition of Alzheimer's disease and the subheaders listed below. I am just going to choose Alzheimer's disease and I'm going to click on Add to Search Builder. The Boolean logic operator AND is always the default, so if you intend to use OR, make sure you change it before you click Add to Search Builder. So once I run this search, I will get 235 hits, and then I will limit it to English and Human, and I'll get 211 hits. And when I further limit it to review articles, I get 101 hits. This is still quite a few articles. Let's say I want to limit Alzheimer's disease to appear only in the title. I can go to the search detail box, which I show on this screen, located at the bottom right of your MESH search. I can change the MESH that is listed after Alzheimer's disease to title, TI, and hit search. I can also use my advanced search field and choose Alzheimer's disease to be in the title. This will help limit the articles. I now have 10 results. However, when I limit it to English, I only get 8 results. I wanted to highlight to you that articles that are written in a different language are shown by their titles being in brackets. So you can search the article by Kovacs, Therapy of Alzheimer's Disease, is a review. However, it is in Hungarian. The article written by Dasko, Prevention and Treatment of Alzheimer's Disease, is a review article, but it is written in Spanish. So again, I always limit my searches to English and human, and then depending on the topic, I will choose the appropriate article type or publication type to use to further limit my search. So in conclusion, always use MESH when possible. Define your search strategy. Think about the subheaders you're going to use, if you're going to use limits or filters, if you're going to restrict to a major topic. Run your search. If you don't see any articles that are interesting to you, consider looking at similar articles. Take a look at the MESH terms that are used by some of those articles, and then rerun your search if needed using different MESH terms and or subheaders, limits, filters, and restrict to major topic. The only way you're going to get adequate and efficient at Medline searches is if you are able to do Medline searches. So I know you are all probably beginning with this skill, and hopefully with the homework session that goes along with this lesson, you will come out with a better understanding of how to do a proper Medline search.